If you're in an organization and you are carrying the burden that things aren't going that well, you need all the help you can get. And if you've got an organization with transparency and you've built a culture of trust and engagement, everyone around you is going to get behind you and want to help you win.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Marc Braun, and this is Encouraging Leaders, a podcast that exists to remind CEOs and aspiring CEOs that they're not alone. Today, it's a special conversation with Garry Ridge, and I wanted to actually get his thoughts on a recent interview with Jana De Anda. It was the last podcast episode, so if you haven't listened to it, just for context, go back, listen to it. But Garry, welcome to the show, and you got the chance to listen to that interview. What resonated with you?
Yeah, g'day, Mark. Great to be here. Always good to be able to reflect on, some great conversations. And certainly the one you had with Jana was a great conversation. And what I thought was really powerful, Mark, was a few points that she made. And the first one was how she explained how Accelerate incorporates coaching into their management style to enhance employee development and engagement. And as you know, that's a passion of both of ours and something that you worked on at Cambridge and I worked on at WD-40, and we found very powerful.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. She didn't call them coaches, but she said she trained every single one of the leaders on the coaching principles, how to ask open-ended questions, how to behave coach-like whenever they were interacting. What pieces of that stood out to you?
I think it was the openness. Her organization and the way she leads really feeds on transparency. And I think that became clear later in the interview as well, where she talked about transparency around compensation.
Yeah.
And I know you picked up on that.
100%.
Where, people it's a bit like that wonderful saying of Braun, in the absence of facts and data, people make up stories.
Right.
And those stories become truth. So when people were talking about career progression and they were talking about, compensation, without having the full picture, they couldn't see the roadmap, nor could they see exactly where they were, and particularly understand that how compensation plays a pivotal part into building a successful organization, which is benefiting all of the constituents. So I thought that was very powerful.
Yeah, I think you're naming the point where she was like, if you can't be transparent, sometimes you can't be clear enough to become transparent. So you end up she was having to take ownership over that and think about where she was not clear and being as clear as she could be as an owner and a leader. And then being able to coach and develop the team by showing them clearly, here's where things were valuable and here's how compensation works currently. And then that provides a platform for being able to have a real honest dialogue.
Definitely.
There's many CEOs that are concerned about transparency, like don't want to be transparent for whatever reason. What do you think is behind that? What stops them?
I think there's a couple of things. One may be fear. And here's a great example. And, if you're in an organization and you are carrying the burden that things aren't going that well, you need all the help you can get. And if you've got an organization with transparency and you've built a culture of trust and engagement, by sharing that information, everyone around you is going to get behind you and want to help you win. Where the leader might feel embarrassed to the fact, like, I'm leading an organization that's not successful. Well, we all know that there's seasons of success, right? And if you're going through a little winter of success right now and you'd prefer to be in the spring of success, having everybody help you plant those seeds and water that garden would be a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, so transparency allows for you to have the whole team behind you, even whenever you're going through a struggle. I think about how I needed to be transparent before I got into the battle, before the big stuff hit, so that I could actually have the team with me when the stuff hit. I think about COVID when it hit, if I hadn't been transparent before it would have been hard to navigate because it was difficult. The challenge was heavy. And so I didn't want to do it alone, and I didn't have to because we had all been transparent going into that. it sets me up for being able to have that team with me whenever we're going through it. I think that's a beautiful thing that she has and transparency can provide.
Yeah. I know you and I have had many conversations as we've been driving along somewhere with nothing to do other than talk to each other about psychological safety.
Yeah.
And, I truly believe that reducing fear and increasing transparency builds trust. And we could call that psychological safety. And what you were just describing at Cambridge is you had your trust meter up pretty high.
Very high.
So as you go into these rough seas, that the team and the crew are ready because they trust that the boat's in reasonably good shape and we're going to make it to the destination.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because psychological safety versus trust, whatever language it is that you feel needed. I mean, we talk a lot about employee engagement. And I think about back to Jana. She's sharing her employee engagement numbers. She said she was almost brought to tears because of the recent survey that came back so high. She said it was an ENPS of 79 at the employee level. That is world class. It's not like an engagement score. It's actually very, very high. What struck you in that conversation of her employee engagement and what was driving that?
Well, again, it comes back to that it's linked to what she calls the pillars or the values of the organization. And, I believe that having a compelling hierarchical set of values protects people and sets them free. And in organizations, you and I know there are some key needs of the people. Number one, do they know they belong? So how are we showing as CEOs? How are we showing our leaders and the people we lead that they belong? Number two, do they matter? And how are we showing them they matter? And, there's nothing better than a clearly defined objective and achieving that to show people that they really matter. So that's, do they belong? Do they matter? And the third one is, can I make a choice? Do I have freedom? And it's the pillars and the values that create the environment to give people permission to make those decisions without quacking up the hierarchy, as I call it, looking for the next level of manager to say, please, sir, may I? Then they don't have the choice. And then finally, of course, it's learning. People want to be great learners. And one thing about Jana's organization is they're continually looking at ways of increasing the competency and of the people that work within the organization, both from a clear competency in the business they're in of consulting, but also their competency as leaders, which is looking in the mirror, seeing what I'm good at, and seeing where I can turn up the volume.
Well, I think about those four areas. Do I belong? Do I matter? Can I make a choice? And what was the fourth one?
Learning.
Yeah, and just to be able to learn and grow and continue to learn and grow. And all of them are present deeply. Going back to the values, she had 4 simple values written down. And then I got to look on his website, just to see where they had operationalized those, how they had written them down. How important is it for leaders? Because I know we've got people that are listening that have either no set of values written down or they've got words, but no operationalized pieces underneath it that are simple and clear. How important is it for CEOs to do what Jana did and to actually have them written out so that you could see them?
I think it's very, very important. Interpretation is important. We did this at WD-40 Company, as you may know. Our first value was we valued doing the right thing. And then we had a paragraph that described what did that look like at WD-40. Mm-hmm. And the reason we needed to do that is, we were spread across the world, and doing the right thing in the United States might look a little different interpretation of doing the right thing in Brazil, China, Germany, the UK, Australia, Poland, or somewhere else. So we wanted the definition of doing the right thing to be aligned with what we wanted. So I think I don't like these one word integrity values. Well, integrity is not a value. It's a prerequisite. Get real. What are the true elements of your business that you want people to understand?
Well, you had a unique challenge at WD-40 because you had translation issues across countries. But I find translation issues when we have just the same language, even when we're just in a US-based, US only, English only speaking company, there's all kinds of different translations of that word integrity. What it meant to me is you show up on time. What it meant to you is that you do the right thing whenever it's hard. What it meant to him, so there's all kinds of different language and chatter from our past. I really think it's a necessity. And for anybody that's listening, if you haven't written down values, get with your team, get to understand what your core values are. I really like Patrick Lencioni's work there. He says they're not, pie in the sky aspirational, like what are we going to be? They're actually who are we right now? And so that we can actually live those values. You don't have to recreate. You just have to define so that you can know when you're acting inside of them and when you're not.
Yeah. I love Seth Godin's quote too. He said, values are the way we do things around here.
The way we do things around here. Yeah. How we behave, the way we do things around here. And when you consistently do things, then people can understand how to act. And they don't have to show up and guess every time. They don't have to be confused all the time. Anything else in the interview stand out to you that CEOs need to know?
The other thing, and I think, you and I may have touched on this in a side conversation earlier, I think that the way that they think about their consulting business is really, really powerful. In other words, they consult with the mindset that if they deliver this package, they would be prepared to unpack it and implement it. Yep. Where I've seen other consultants who kind of deliver the stuff, say, here it is. And then when you go to try and unpack it and deliver, it's like, I don't know how to do it. So they go in with that mindset, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, it's, it makes me want to work with her. It makes me want our companies that I work with to work with her, because her team, you could just hear it. They're sitting there thinking about the behaviors. We have to actually adjust the behaviors of the folks who are serving clients, or else it doesn't actually touch. It doesn't actually move. And so, she was talking about the other consulting firms that sometimes it's proving how smart you are instead of actually accomplishing the mission. And so she said, the way she described it was some consultants are only on formulation of strategy and others are on translation and implementation. And she focuses her team on translation and implementation because that's where the actual, it's where the meat's on the bone.
Yeah,
I think about our work in coaching, and it's the same thing for me. It's if we talk about how smart the idea is, it doesn't mean anything if the behaviors didn't adjust at the leadership level.
But she had some great takeaways. The importance of a team-oriented approach in leadership, that was very clear. The impact of her personal history and resilience on her style, growing up in Beirut, living in a war zone, the influence of her mum. She talked about the role of mentoring and coaching in personal and organizational growth. And you and I know that that's what we're dedicated to. And, she also talked about that balance that you have to have in business between your customers, your employees, the communities that you serve. So I think it was just a wonderful, wonderful podcast. And, if those that are listening to us right now haven't had the chance to go on, listen and watch, they should do that. There's lots of rich learning there.
100% agreed. So if you're listening now, go back one episode, push play. She mentioned that many female leaders never have the opportunity to have a female leader in their life mentoring, and she wants to change that. I want that changed. I have had female leaders in my life speaking into me, and I've needed every one of them. I would love for more people to learn from Jana and her leadership style, so that she can influence the world. And it's such a powerful example. I just really wanted more and more of her influence in my life and in my friends that run companies and lead companies. So if you haven't done that, check it out. You can always find Gary or I at encouragingleaders.com. Looking forward to it. And we'll see you later.